The evening sky was the color of old copper, bruised with violet shadows, as though the land itself bore wounds it could not hide. Eli McGraw rode alone across the prairie, his horse moving slow beneath the weight of silence. Dust rose in pale ghosts behind them, and the cicadas had already begun their song. He was thinking of nothing, because nothing was safer than memory, when he heard it, a voice, fragile as a reed, carried faintly on the wind. He pulled at the reins, listening. The sound came again, a tremor, not a shout. Please. There, on the dirt road ahead, was a figure, a woman, or what remained of one, kneeling in the dust, her palms pressed flat to the ground, as if she were begging at an altar invisible to all but her. Her dress, once pale, was caked with mud and torn at the hem. Her hair clung to her face in dark ropes, heavy with sweat and grit. Eli stopped a good 20 paces off. Strays, drifters, beggars, he had seen plenty, and plenty he had ridden past. The West taught you early that mercy could get a man killed as quick as malice. But then she lifted her face. Her eyes were wide, hollow, the color of river water after storm. There was no plea in them for coin or shelter, only for breath. Water, she whispered, lips cracked like sun-baked clay. Eli swung down from his horse, boots sinking into the soft dirt. He carried his canteen in his hand, hesitating. When he offered it, she clutched it too fast, spilling half down her chin, coughing as she drank. For a moment, he almost turned back to his horse. She was alive, wasn't she? He'd done his part. But something made him linger. Perhaps the way her hands trembled, or the sound of her swallow, raw and desperate. It was when she lifted her hair that he froze. Around her throat, stark against pale skin, were bruises. Dark, raw welts, the unmistakable signature of a rope. He had seen such marks before on livestock dragged by the neck. Never on a woman who still drew breath. His chest tightened. He knelt, slow as a man approaching a rattlesnake. "Who did this to you?" he asked, though his voice was barely more than gravel in the dusk. Her answer was not words, but silence, her gaze falling to the earth like it held secrets she could not speak. Eli felt shame rise hot in him. Shame at how part of him still wanted to mount his horse and leave her to the night. What claim had he to her suffering? What good had ever come of pulling strangers from the jaws of trouble? He remembered another face then, pale beneath the dirt of a grave. His wife, Anna, whose sickness had been met not with kindness but whispers of weakness. He had stood silent against the judgment of neighbors, and silence had cost him more than he could bear. The woman in the dirt raised her head once more, and he saw it clear. Not madness, not wickedness, but a life balanced on the thin edge of mercy. He cursed under his breath, low and bitter, for he knew what decision was already written in him. Eli lifted her carefully, her frame lighter than the saddlebag slung on his horse. She winced, clutching at his shirt, but made no sound. He mounted, settling her before him in the saddle. The warmth of her press against him was both frail and burning, like holding a coal that could not be dropped. The horizon rumbled with thunder as they turned toward his ranch. Neither spoke. The prairie stretched endless and indifferent, and yet Eli could not shake the feeling that the land itself was watching, waiting to see what weight he would carry. By the time the first drops of rain hit the brim of his hat, he knew one truth too heavy for denial. Whatever had marked this woman's throat had also marked his soul. He would not ride away clean from it. Not now. The rain had passed by dawn, leaving the prairie raw with the smell of wet earth and pine. Clara Winters, though Eli did not yet know her name, woke beneath a patched quilt in the ranch house. For a long while she lay still, staring up at rafters blackened by smoke, listening to the creak of timbers and the slow drip of rainwater slipping from the eaves. Her first thought was that it must be a dream. The ceiling, the warmth of blankets, the low crackle of fire, it was all too steady, too kind to be real. She waited for the dream to shift, to turn her back beneath the rope, the jeering faces, the snap of wood. But instead came the smell of coffee, bitter and grounding. She rose, stiff as an old hinge, and stepped barefoot across the wooden floor. Her throat ached with every swallow. When she touched the bruise at her neck, her hand recoiled as though from flame. Eli was at the stove, his shoulders broad. His hat hung on the peg beside the door. He turned when she entered, but said nothing. His eyes flicked her throat, then back to the tin cup in his hand. He poured coffee, set it on the table, and sat across from her as though silence itself were company enough. She wrapped her fingers around the cup. The warmth stung, but she clung to it as though it were the last kindness in the world. By noon, word had already reached town. Jedediah Boone, who never could keep his mouth from wagging, leaned against the hitching post outside the mercantile, spitting tobacco into the dust. "McGraw's got a woman up there," he drawled. "One with a rope mark round her neck. Ain't decent, a man to keen in such company." Deputy Saul Harlan listened, jaw set tight as a rusted hinge. "If she's marked by the rope," he said flatly, "then she's marked by the law. Best she not linger long." And so the whisper spread, which harlot, noose dodger, in a town that lived by reputation. Clara was already a shadow in the doorway of every home. At the well the next day, Clara felt the weight of those whispers. Women fetched water. Boys drove cattle past. Men tipped their hats not to her but away from her. One woman muttered, "The rope slipped for a reason." Another hissed, "God don't spare sinners." Clara lowered her gaze, the bucket heavy in her hands. Her cheeks burned, but no tears came. She had learned long ago that tears made the jeering sharper. It was then she felt it. Another presence. Eli had stepped up beside her, silent as a stone. He said nothing, offered no words to cut through the murmur. But his stance, broad and steady at her side, was louder than speech. The whispers faltered. The crowd thinned. When they walked back together, Clara whispered, "You shouldn't stand so close. Their scorn will stain you, too." Eli only shrugged, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Scorn don't weigh near as heavy as silence. Nights at the ranch were quiet. The wind pressed against the shutters. Coyotes sang out in the dark. Eli mended tools by lamplight, while Clara sat near the hearth, fingers picking at the hem of her dress. One night, when the silence grew thick, she spoke. Her voice was raw, as though each word cost her a piece of her throat. "They said I betrayed them. Said I called storms down on the harvest. Said I—" She stopped, hands trembling. "Truth is, I was just too proud. Too poor. Too alone." Her eyes caught the firelight then, and Eli saw not madness, but a deep, aching weariness. "I was tied to a tree, rope round my neck. The preacher stopped them short of finishing it. Said it would bring shame on the town. So they left me instead. Left me to wander with the rope's kiss still on me." Eli set his tools down. His hand hovered over the table, then settled still. He did not reach for her, not yet, but the weight of his listening steadied her, like a post driven deep into the earth. That night, as she dozed near the fire, she hummed under her breath, a tune low and sweet, without words. Eli closed his eyes, hearing in it the echo of lullabies his wife once sang, the kind that had once filled his empty house with warmth. He had not thought such sounds could return. Days passed. Clara moved slowly through the chores of the ranch, fetching eggs, carrying water, patching cloth. She did them not with joy, but with a steady determination, as though to prove she still belonged to the living. Eli, in turn, offered no instruction, no orders, only quiet presence. Where she stumbled, he steadied. Where she faltered, he waited. But the town would not forget. Deputy Harlan rode up one afternoon, dust swirling behind his horse. He dismounted with the weariness of a man who carried law like a burden on his back. "She can't stay, Eli," he said. His voice was not cruel, only tired. "The law don't take kindly to those who dodge the rope. Folks'll turn restless. You know how that ends." Eli stood in the doorway, arms folded, blocking the sight of Clara within. His words came slow, measured. "She's done no wrong here. She drinks water, mends fences, keeps to herself. That enough to hang a soul?" Harlan's jaw tightened. He looked past Eli, toward the woman inside, then back. "You'll lose the town if you keep her." Eli's gaze did not waver. "Then I'll lose it." That night, the storm outside rattled the roof, wind shrieking like judgment itself. Clara sat across from Eli at the table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her voice was barely more than the wind's echo when she spoke. "If you keep me," she whispered, "you'll lose the town." If you cast me out, you'll keep your place. Which weight do you want? Eli's hand moved slowly, steady as a river current. He laid it across hers, weathered palm over trembling fingers. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The firelight flickered across their joined hands, casting a glow that felt almost like defiance. Outside, the storm raged on, but within, something fragile had begun to hold. The storm that had prowled the edges of the prairie all week finally broke on the morning the town gathered. Clouds pressed low and heavy, their bellies swollen with rain. The air smelled of iron and dust, like breath held too long. Clara was not given the choice. Jedediah Boone had roused the men at dawn, their voices rising with the crows. She was dragged from Eli's ranch, wrists bound though she did not fight. Boone's hand was rough on her arm, his grin sharp as barbed wire. "Best to finish what was started," he muttered, loud enough for Eli to hear. Eli saddled his horse in silence. His rifle leaned against the wall, but he left it. There was another kind of battle to be fought this day. By midday, the square was thick with townsfolk. Children clung to their mothers' skirts. Men stood with arms folded, boots muddy from the rain. In the center, beneath the hanging tree, Clara stood with a rope coiled once more in Harlan's hand. Her face was pale, but her chin lifted. The bruise on her throat glowed like a brand. Proof of pain survived. Reverend Amos Cole stood nearby, his Bible clutched too tightly, his lips pale as if the words inside him curdled before they could escape. Harlan's voice cut through the crowd. "This woman bears the mark of judgment. The rope spared her once. Some say by miracle, others by mistake. Either way, she carries shame upon her neck. And shame cannot be sheltered long." The crowd murmured. Some nodded, others looked away. Rain began to patter on the roofs, soft and steady. Eli rode and then, slow, each hoof striking the mud like a drumbeat. He dismounted and stepped through the throng without a word. His coat was dark with rain, his face unreadable. When Harlan lifted the rope, Eli moved. He placed himself between Clara and the noose. The air seemed to tighten around him, as if the storm itself paused to listen. "If she's guilty," Eli said, his voice low but carrying, "then so am I, for shelter in her, for believe in her. And if that makes me guilty, hang me first." The crowd stilled. Boone barked a laugh, but no one joined him. Mothers hushed their children. Even the rain seemed to hush, falling softer. Clara's breath caught. She stared at Eli's back, broad and steady, his shoulders set like stone. For the first time in weeks, she felt the rope around her throat loosen, not in flesh but in spirit. Reverend Amos stepped forward then, trembling. His voice was cracked, but it carried. "The truth," he faltered, eyes darting to Harlan, to Boone, to the crowd. His hands shook on the Bible. "The truth is, Clara Winters was no witch, no traitor. She was a scapegoat for a man's crime I was too cowardly to name. I watched as rope was laid round her throat, and I let silence be her sentence." A gasp rippled through the people. The preacher bowed his head, tears streaking his cheeks. "Her suffering is mine to bear, and if you hang her, you hang me as well." Harlan's grip on the rope slackened. His jaw worked, his eyes narrowing, but his hand trembled. Then Clara spoke. Her voice was quiet, but in that hush, every word was heard. "You call me cursed because I lived when I was meant to die. You call me marked because the rope left its kiss. But I tell you this, mercy marked me more. A stranger gave me water when I had none, bread when I starved, silence when the world spat. If that is curse, then let me bear it." Her eyes swept the crowd, not in defiance but in calm. "I am not a ghost. I am not a witch. I am a woman who still breathes. And I will not bow to shame that was never mine." The words hung in the rain. Faces shifted, some uneasy, some softened, some ashamed. Boone scowled, but no man echoed him now. Harlan exhaled through his nose, slow. He dropped the rope into the mud. "Enough," he muttered. "Let her be." The crowd, restless, broke apart. Mothers led children home. Men turned their faces away. Boone spat once more, but slunk into the shadows. And just like that, the square emptied, leaving only the rain, the tree, and those who had stood against it. Eli turned then. Clara's eyes met his. She did not smile, did not weep. She only reached for the coat he held out, his gesture as simple as rain falling, as steady as stone. He draped it over her shoulders, the fabric heavy, warm, a shield against the storm. Together they walked from the square, not hand in hand, not with words of promise, but side by side, an unspoken vow in every step. That night, as the rain eased into silence, Eli stood on his porch, the lantern dim at his side. Clara sat within, the firelight painting her face in gold. He thought of gallows and silence, of ropes and scars. He thought of the strength it had taken not to fight with guns or fists, but to stand and simply refuse to step aside. And he thought of her voice, steady in the storm, lifting not only her own head but his as well. He knew then that something had shifted, not only in the town, not only in Clara, but in himself. Narrator's reflection, final life lesson. In the West, men believed strength was the draw of a gun or the weight of a rope. But I learned it could also be the stillness of a body standing firm, the quiet of a hand extended when shame pressed hard. If you remember nothing else, remember this. Mercy leaves deeper marks than cruelty, and sometimes the bravest thing a soul can do is stand tall, not for themselves, but for another,